My wife and I decided to go on a cruise, which we hadn't done before. So we went on a 10-day cruise in the Baltic Sea, and it ended around the 1st of June in Oslo. On the way home, I got really sick, high fever and stuff. And so the next day, that was a Monday, which was day one, and the number of days will be important as we go along later in the story. Tuesday, which was day two, we flew to Amsterdam and then flew home, and I was really sick on the flight home. And today, of course, they would throw you out the airplane window. In those days, they just took care of you and brought ice and whatever, because I had a high fever. So Tuesday night, we got home, and I went to bed, and I thought it was a really bad flu. Wednesday, Thursday, which was day 3 and 4, sick. And finally, Friday, day 5, I thought, well, I better go to the clinic. I went to the walk-in clinic here in Canada, and they have a sign in there that says if you have a cough and stuff, let the nurse know, et cetera, et cetera. So I sent my wife in to tell her that I wasn't doing well. And she came out, the nurse came out, took one look at me and said, "You can't come in here." They wouldn't let me in, and she said, "You have to go to the ER. There's nothing we can do for you here anyway." So I apparently looked like that. And so we drove to the University of Alberta Medical Center here in Edmonton. And, I went to the ER, and, you usually go to the ER, and it's, I don't know, an hour on a bad day, 2 or 3, depending on, you got to sit there and they triage and do all that stuff. In 10 minutes, I was in a private room. I didn't know they had private rooms in the emergency. The only thing I'd ever seen were those little curtain thingies,
Yeah.
And so in 10 minutes, I'm in a private room, and in 10 more minutes, the doctors are all over me. And I'm like, ooh, this is not good. So they did start doing tests and stuff. In the afternoon wore on, and they kept bringing in news. Well, you have pneumonia. And then they kept bringing in more news. Something else is wrong. That's in both lungs. And you're definitely going to be admitted in the hospital, and we're not sure, do some more stuff. So I sent Joy home because we had dogs and cats to take care of, and I was going to be admitted. So I told her to go home, go to sleep, come back tomorrow, and we'll see what's going on. They moved me up to the floor and then kept coming in. And then they said, something else is very wrong. We're not sure what it is. And they came back in and said, yeah, I think we're going to move you to the ICU. Yeah, okay. And they came back later and said, yeah, we're going to put you in biological isolation.
Ooh.
Like hazmat, safety level 4, double doors, airlock. Holy crap. Okay, and then shortly before midnight, they came in and said, asked the question you never want to hear, and said, do we have permission to intubate you and do anything we need to do to preserve your life? And I said, what? Okay. And then I realized I was really trembling. My body was crashing, and so I went into meditation. It's a practice I've had all my life. And I could feel in my body and spirit separating, which I'd never felt before. It was like unzipping, it felt like. And so I picked up my phone, and my hands were trembling, and I sent Joy a text. It was only 3 lines. The first line said ICU, and the second line was isolation/intubation, and the third line was I may be dying. Because I could feel my body and spirit separating. Well, she was asleep, and she didn't see it. And about 2:30 or 3 in the morning, she got the call from the hospital that you never want to get in the middle of the night. And the nurse said to her, "Are you coming?" And she's like, "What?" And then she saw my text. So somewhere in that time frame, I crashed. So I was in the ICU and whatever. So I effectively died. Flatlined. And when I came to spiritually, energetically, so I'll get organized here. I was in a coma from that point forward for 17 days. They eventually were able to restart my heart, but I'll start that in a minute. So my heart stopped. I died. I came to in a gray room, and I was horizontal like I was in the stretcher. The room was gray, like photocard gray. I really couldn't see the ceiling or the walls or anything. It was sort of an indeterminate size. But over my left shoulder, over there, I could see a door. I wanted to be at the door, for some reason. And so then I was standing at the door and I was leaning on the door jamb on my right shoulder. And across on the other side of the door on that shoulder was someone leaning on that side. And I noticed the other side of the door was white. My side was gray. And it wasn't streaming through or anything, just gray on this side and a very soft gray and white on that side. And we stood there for a little while, and then he looked at me and he said, do you want to come home? And I thought, holy crap. And so you know things in that state that you don't know otherwise. So I knew who I was talking to and where I was standing and what the question meant and all of that all at once. And so we talked about it for a while. And 10 years earlier in 2007, I'd had a divine intervention that had gotten me sober. I had a long history of depression and very high performing jobs, made a lot of money, but I was a dual life person behind the scenes. I was a drug addict and I'd ruined multiple relationships and married and divorced 3 times, and it was sort of movie fodder. But anyway, so I'd had that divine intervention that had got me sober 10 years earlier. So we talked about that. And after that, I'd left that industry and became a coach, which is what I do now. And so we talked about everything I'd done and what there was to do and what my wife and I had planned and all those things. And finally, after a while, I said, well, I'm not done yet. Said, okay. So that was the end of that conversation.
We had left the house around 5:45, somewhere around there. We were driving for a holiday dinner. Myself, my son then, who was 5, and 2 of my nephews were in the car. My husband was in a truck behind us because he had a ladder on his truck that we needed to take to where we were going for dinner. So he was in the truck behind us. As we were leaving, we started driving down Green Spring Avenue, which is a main road around here. And as we were driving down, an older man ran a stop sign, and my side of the car was crushed with me in it. Thank God my son did have some bleeding and my 2 nephews were fine. The man had ran the stop sign, and thank God where my son was sitting, he didn't hit that side so bad. It was more the driver's side that got crushed. When that happened, my husband immediately jumped out of his truck to make sure everybody was okay. I could not breathe, so I started beeping the horn like crazy just to let somebody know I need help. I couldn't breathe. When my husband came over to check on us, he saw that our son was bleeding right around here and attended to him. Going back, he probably thought I was beeping for him to just come help us because he did not realize that I wasn't breathing. My left leg was crushed under the dashboard, stuck under the dashboard. My whole chest, abdomen, stomach area was crushed by the steering wheel and the impact of the car. I was in so much pain, John. Then I literally saw my whole life flash in front of my eyes, and it happened really quick. Needless to say, right after that, I didn't feel any pain. And next thing I know, I'm somewhere else. Very unfamiliar to me. However, the absolute most peaceful place, and there is nothing on earth like it. I have so many people asking me, can you explain the peacefulness? And the best analogy I could come up with is I would say, what makes you feel peaceful? Some people say taking a bath. Some will say lighting a candle. And my next response is multiply that by infinity. Because as you know, we can't do that. Infinity never ends. That was the peacefulness that I had there. It was very calm. I did not have anyone meet me or greet me. I did not see God. I get that question a lot. I did not. However, I felt a very, very strong presence around. And I do recall it being on the male side. I remember knowing and even saying to myself, wow, this is home. We have a home here, but it's nothing like there. And you just know you're home. I ended up, my soul did leave my physical body. And I do recall having a moment as if I was saying goodbye to my physical body. I do remember my head being on the left side, my feet were on the right, my eyes were closed, and I knew and could see that I was no longer breathing, that part of me. As I was pretty much saying goodbye to my physical body, I looked around. I saw a lot of different things. I never had that bright light that people talk about. Never had that. For me, it was the absolute most peaceful place. I had looked around and I could tell you there were no doors, there were no windows, there were no floors, there were no ceilings, there were no clocks, no dates, no time of any sort. There was also no weather. It was not cold. It was not hot. It was not humid. It was perfect. In the beginning, it was great contrasts of blacks, whites, and grays. After receiving a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, also I was given the opportunity to look down on earth and see so many different types of individuals with so many different cultures, so many different activities. Every single person had a purpose. When I was given the opportunity to look down onto earth and to see all the different people, souls that are here. Have you ever gone to like a bumper car park, for example, where you can ride bumper cars?
Yeah.
And the bumper cars have that, it's like a pole antenna that goes up to the ceiling of where you're driving.
Yeah. Lets out the
And
sparks.
exactly, to move it, right? To be able to drive it. It was very similar to that. Every human being that I looked upon had that. However, here we don't see that. There I saw that. I was shown that this is how they're guided through their direction and their purpose. It was very interesting at some point, and of course, there's no time there. So you don't know how long you're there. You just don't have that. I do remember actually, it was right before I got pulled back to here. They did work on me in the trauma unit to stabilize me for over 6 hours. Told my husband numerous times, we're trying to stabilize her, we're trying to save her. It was very hard. My husband was running between the trauma unit and emergency room because, obviously they were checking my son out from the bleeding that he had. I do remember right before I got pulled back, it was already after I said goodbye to my physical body. That was no longer going to be a part of me. That was a given. I do remember turning between 35 to a 40-degree towards the left side, ready to go somewhere else. And that's where I was yanked back. There are absolutely no worries, no concerns, no problems.
Well, in 1967, I had a lacerated liver that was caused by being hit in the side. I was in surgery, taken into surgery. Back then, they didn't have the diagnostic things that they have nowadays, like CAT scans or MRIs. And so because my blood count was dropping drastically and my blood pressure, they decided they needed to go in and find out why. So I was wheeled into surgery and I saw the masked faces of the nurses and the surgeons around me, and knew when they put the mask over my face that things should go dark and that I should be out. But that didn't happen. They put the mask over my face and I could see them, and it did grow dark, but I was awake. I couldn't see anything. It was dark, but I was awake, and I couldn't breathe, and I was struggling to breathe, and it was a horrible, horrible feeling, like you're drowning. I'm being underwater and desperately trying to take in air, and I couldn't breathe. And as I was struggling, I kind of went through that blackness into what appeared to be a cave of some sort. And I didn't feel like I had to breathe anymore. I was still somewhat panicky, but that feeling of having to breathe was going away. And with that, the anxiety. And I wasn't fearful. I don't remember being fearful, but it was just strange. And I saw down below me, I saw my husband and my two sons around what appeared to be a lamppost, and it was raining, and they were crying. And I wanted to tell them, no, I'm okay. Everything's all right. And they seemed to know that I had died. And I wanted to tell them, no, I'm not dead. I'm fine. And then I got this really peaceful feeling that they were going to be just fine. And then I moved on, and I saw 4 people standing off to the left of me. And they had really concerned looks on their faces. They weren't people that I recognized. I had known people that had died, but they weren't anybody that I recognized. They were in street clothes. They weren't angels or anything of that sort, but these very concerned looks, like, we're very afraid for you. And I didn't understand that. And I went by them and continued on down the hallway or cave-like structure. And this thought came to me that I had been, up to this point, very much an atheist. I had, as a child, tried to believe in God and couldn't, and was an agnostic. But my 7-year-old son, Mark, was hit by a car and killed. And at that point, I became very much a non-believer, that no God could kill little children. And I was angry and bitter, and people would try to pacify me by saying he was with Jesus now, and I would back them up and say, your Jesus kills little children, screaming at them. I was so angry and so bitter. And like I say, I tried to believe in God, but that just wasn't something that ever happened. So at this point came the thought to me, there is a God. And I heard this freight train noise, louder than anything that I've ever heard. The noise through my head, this horrendous noise, and something pulling through the middle of me like a rope going 1,000,000 miles an hour. And then it stopped, and I knew without any doubt that God did exist. And I can't explain that to you in human terms, how much I knew that, but if I put my hand up in front of me and say, this is my hand, I know that that's my hand, and you're not going to convince me of any other thing, right? So I knew beyond any doubt that God did exist, and I was excited about that. And then I moved on, and I saw this brilliant light with some kind of structure holding it back. And that same noise came, and the same burning through the middle of me, and it stopped, and I knew that I was headed towards heaven. And there were emotions of this extreme peace that I've never felt, excitement, of euphoria, of just anything you can imagine that is the most intense, beautiful thing that could happen to anybody was happening to me. And I had no qualms about leaving my husband, my sons, to go here. That's all that mattered, that I was going to heaven. And the excitement was beyond my ability to explain it. Then the noise came again, and the burning through my chest, and all of a sudden I felt there is no hell, and the bottom dropped out at that point, like being in an elevator, and the bottom dropped out, and you're falling into this total darkness, and falling and screaming, and hearing screams and screaming out that I believe in you, God. And I knew I was in hell. And again, I can't explain how I knew that, but I did know that that's where I was. I knew that I thought God doesn't even know I'm here, that I am completely completely away from anybody or anything. I'm non-existent. I'm going to fall and burn and scream for eternity. I can't commit suicide. No one's going to be able to, because nobody even knows I'm there. Nobody's going to save me, not even God. He doesn't enter into this place. I guess I don't know. Anyway, I was screaming, God, I believe in you. Please, God, take me from this place. But this hopelessness was there. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. And I started spiraling backwards, back through the tunnel. And I got to a point near the entrance or the entrance of it. And I heard an audible voice say to me, bring people to me. Then I felt this actual will to live enter back into my body. You can call it your spirit, whatever you want, but I call it the will to live, because once you lose the will to live, you die. And so the spirit leaves you, you die, you separate your body from your spirit. You're still you, because you are, I believe, your spirit. You're not this flesh and blood thing that's going to turn to dust. You are a spirit that lives for eternity. So anyway, I felt that. I heard that audible voice say, bring people to me. I felt that will to live enter back into my body. And at that point, I was excited I was going to live. As soon as that happened, that whatever happened to me, I came to in the operating room and was screaming, there is a God, there is a God. I died. And then that was what happened.